Okay, I'm sorry I'm going to read here, but I realize that I can sort of barely put a sentence together at this point, and I better just stay on script. In introducing this afternoon's plenary speaker, I'd like to briefly tell the story of how I discovered her show. I think you'll see that it's really a story about why we need her show. It was about a year and a half ago, and I'd been asked by some pals at Christ Church in Georgetown to give one session of an adult forum series on Christian ethics. Of course, they asked me to speak about moral questions around digital media and the internet. My prep got pushed a little bit late in the game, and I needed to cram at the last minute. And so I did what I always do when I want to learn something new in a hurry. I downloaded a bunch of podcasts, and I also laced up my running shoes. One of the shows I listened to had a great story that I knew we wanted to share with our group. It was a pretty long excerpt, and I try to be mindful of copyright, so I reached out to the hosts. They replied, please share as long of a clip as you want, and please send us a photo of your group afterward. So I'm about a mile into my run at this point, but also 3 or 4 tweets into my run. And usually copyright compliance isn't quite as big a part of my exercise routine, and I'm grateful for that. So I continue on, and I'm listening to several episodes of a show that is new to me, a show from WNYC in New York. It was called New Tech City, and it was about finding balance in a digital age. What struck me immediately is that the hosts obviously loved technology, but she wanted her listeners right away to be asking the hard questions about how this technology is shaping us. As someone who wears his technology exuberance on his sleeve, I need a voice in my earbuds like that of our speaker. I think I tweeted back and forth with Manoush on that same run that day. You're getting to see why I need this show. And then again, a year or so later, after getting excited about an experiment she did with her audience. You'll hear a bit about that experiment today. So, the show is now called Note to Self. The tagline is now the tech show about being human. But we still need the voice of Manoush Zomorodi from WNYC Studios. Please join me in welcoming her to eFormation.
Want to make sure that that's okay. I am so happy to be here. This is such a, first of all, like, when do I ever get to sit and like with a stone for half an hour before I go to work? I don't. I think I'm going to have to start doing that actually on a regular basis. Thank you so much to Lisa and Kyle for inviting me to join you here today. I know that it has been an intense few days, so I hope that I can sort of energize you after the delicious lunch you have and the wonderful singing that we just had. He has an amazing voice, right? So as Kyle said, I host a show. It's a podcast. Any podcast listeners here? If you don't know how to podcast, I know someone who will show you how to podcast. He will definitely show you. It's that little purple button if you have iOS. Android just came out with it on Play. And the reason why I love podcasting so much is this deep intimacy that I am able to have with my listener. It is a very different medium. It's something that I have never experienced with, I've been a TV reporter, I've been a radio broadcaster, but being a podcast host has made me feel close to my audience in a way that I have never felt before, and I think I want to delve into that a little bit today as well. So as Kyle said, what we do is it's a tech show about being human, but to me, it's really about telling stories about understanding our technology, because the more we understand our technology, the more we can truly understand ourselves. And we can also use it better in our lives, I think. But I also like to inject a lot of humor into my treatment of this, so I want to just show you a little video that I did that kicked off one project first. We're counting how many people not only are walking by, but how many of them are looking at their phones, how many of them are using their phone. That could be like listening to earbuds or something. They're interacting, they're having, their phone is part of what they're doing. And there's a lot of people sort of getting to work, they're zoning out. And then there are other people who are looking at their phones, like I have to get this done before I walk into the office, I guess is what they're doing. And then there are people who are just like gripping their phones. They're not looking at them, but they're at the ready. If they needed to look at their phone, they could. Celebrity even walked by. Emily Blunt walked by. Was she on her phone? No, she was having a Zen moment. I think she was coming from the gym. That was really boring on purpose. But before I do that, I want to just tell you a little bit about who I am. Let's see, I have a slide. There we go. Here I am. Oh, it didn't format right, whatever. Prone to anxiety, how perfect that that was the one that didn't format right, the sentence. I'm a journalist. I was with the BBC and with Reuters for a long time. I have 2 little kids who don't have phones yet. Definitely prone to anxiety, but I've learned it can actually help me in many ways, as anybody who spends time on the podcast with me knows. And so what I wanted to do was sit down and think for a minute. My job is to be creative. My job is to make episodes that enthrall people, that bring ideas to life. And there was this day, and maybe this has happened to you, where you sat down, you're like, okay, big idea, let's go. And there was nothing there, like empty space, exhaustion. And so I tried to sort of figure out, when had I gotten my best ideas in the past? When had I come up with this idea for a podcast? When had I written that first book that I did? And it was such a cliche, but it was true. I got my weirdest ideas when I went for a long walk, or I was waiting in line for coffee, or I was staring out the window and my dad was driving very poorly. When I was really bored, that's when those moments would arrive. And then I realized, I hadn't been bored in a long time, years. Since 2008, when I first got my phone. And this is just a coincidental fun fact. My son and the iPhone were both born in June of 2007. Now, whenever I was waiting to pick up my kids, or I was sitting on the subway, or I was in line for coffee, I wasn't bored, all the time. I just looked at my phone, and I wonder, can you relate to this? It's so easy, right? It's like your stone, isn't it, in a way? And I wondered, are there consequences to not being bored? What happens if we never let ourselves space out? Could we be missing something? So I started talking to neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists who told me that yes, actually, they hadn't really thought of it that way, but that could be a problem. Because it turns out, when we get bored, we activate something in our mind. Our minds start to wander, and it's the default mode. So your body is doing nothing, but your brain is actually incredibly busy. It's when we do some of our most original thinking. It's when we do problem solving. It's when we do something that I learned was called autobiographical planning. It's when we look back at our life and we start to catalog it and we make sense of it, and then we figure out how to take those lessons and apply them going forward to setting goals as we go on. And so that seemed like a big deal to be missing out on that. So I wanted to know, if we used our phones differently, could we actually force ourselves to activate our default mode, my kids will like that one, activate our default mode more often, and could we jumpstart our creativity? What would happen if we embraced getting bored? That could be weird. Could we maybe help ourselves have bigger and better ideas just by rethinking our relationship with our gadgets? Could we change the way we work? Could we change the way we parent? Could we change the way that we live? Could we even get brilliant? And so, as I looked into the further scientific research, what I found was that what we know about what our gadgets and smartphones are doing to our brains is incredibly preliminary. We are experimenting on ourselves in ways that the scientific community has not caught up. And so I proposed to my audience, what if we did our own experiment? First, let's figure out how much time exactly we spend on our phones, and then let's try and tweak our behavior to see if we can help ourselves think better. Let's see what works. I didn't have the answers for sure. So we called the project Bored and Brilliant, the lost art of spacing out. Thousands of people signed up, and they told us, this is very interesting, I think, the reasons why they wanted to do it. There were three major reasons. They wanted to be more productive. They felt addicted to their technology. They were worried about their health, but they also wanted data, as these people do, right? So we actually partnered with 2 apps, and they monitored exactly how much time we spent on our phones on a typical day. So you can still do the project. Moment is on the left there for iOS. Break Free, I know this audience actually knows what I'm talking about. Break Free is for Android. And so we measured not only how many minutes we spent on our phone, but actually how many times a day we pick up our phone. And it was kind of shocking. Like, I don't think I realized how often I'd get in the elevator, look at my phone, walk outside, look at my phone, to the point where it was becoming a reflex for me. And until I saw it in black and white, in numbers, it really hadn't quite hit home. So collectively, we were averaging just over 2 hours a day on our phones, and we were checking our phones around 60 times a day. And that number is actually extremely conservative. The stat that most people throw around is 150 times a day of checking your phone. So my listenership, I think, is on the mindful side already to begin with. And then, so here's what we did during a challenge week. Every day, I would send out a mission, right? Here's what I want you to try today. See how it goes, and then let's check in later. So every morning we emailed them. We also included an accompanying podcast, which had the science behind it, the technology behind what we were asking them to do. So day 1, for example, was put it in your pocket. Keep your phone out of sight when you're in transit. No walking and texting. Harder than you think. But everyone agreed that the hardest day was day 3. It was delete that app. We asked people, yeah, right? We asked people to take the app that drives you. You know that app, right? You know that one app that you're like, whoa, I just want to tap it so bad. For me, I mean, do you guys know 2 Dots? I love this game. Like, I love it, but I cannot handle this game. I will sit and play. It is my gin and tonic. It is my, you know what I mean? I just love it so much, and I was getting so good at it too. I had to take it off my phone, and it's been now 15 months and a half that it's been off my phone. Thank you. I mean, you know, and everybody's different, right? There were some people who said, it was Twitter for me, and I've decided that once a month I'm going to take it off my phone for a day just to show myself I don't need it. So everyone, started to set their own parameters, right? Because we're all so different. I needed abstinence. That's fine. But in the end, I gotta say, here's the data slide. The average decrease was 6 fewer minutes. I know, right? Parents did better. They cut down an average of 16. Gamers, 20 minutes. So I brought the data back to the neuroscientists and the cognitive psychologists, and they laughed at me. They were like, are you kidding me? You tried to change people's behavior in 5 days? Do you know how difficult it is to change a culture? I was like, oh, I guess you're right about that. And they said, really what I should acknowledge is the fact that shaving off minutes is one thing, but empowering people, giving them the sense that they control these tools, not that these tools control them, was a wonderful thing. And we got these amazing stories from people about how they felt afterwards. I'm gonna go back one more. I feel like I'm becoming myself again for the first time in several years. I pick up my guitars more. I go to bed earlier. I sleep better. I'm happier. The list goes on. My friends can't believe I don't have Facebook on my phone anymore. I can't believe I did it for so long. 70% after challenge week of the 20,000 people who did it said that they now felt as though they had enough time to think. My favorite was Billy in Brooklyn. He wrote me an email that said, I feel as though I've woken up from a mental hibernation. I love that. And really, to me, most extraordinary was the reaction that we got from teachers and students, both at the college and the high school level. We heard from students who told us that studying was easier. They told us they thought they were stupid, and once they weren't looking at Facebook while they were trying to study, they realized, actually no brain can do 2 things at once. Schools have asked us for curriculum plans. Freshmen at the University of New Orleans requested that every semester kick off with Bored and Brilliant. We also heard from entrepreneurs who solved major business problems, writers who finished a book. I am now doing the Bored and Brilliant book version, which is coming from St. Martin's Press next fall. And I think hearing from people, it was really, to me, though, the teachers that I found the most compelling. Because a teenager is going to be like, I'm not doing this stupid public radio thing. But there's some teachers out there who are just like, let's just do it. It'll be fun. Let's just do it. And Joel Adams, for example, he teaches high school in Jacksonville, Florida. He got his whole class to do Bored and Brilliant. And here's what he told me, if we can play that.
All right, everyone. So last week we talked about the Bored and Brilliant project. How many of you are going to participate? Yeah, wonderful.
So what did you observe after they did it? What did you see? Was there I don't know, twitching?
Not twitching, more eye contact, actually. One of the things that we're in a pretty tech-saturated classroom, so they're always in front of screens of some sort. And I think part of what this project actually also did was try to highlight for them that from the moment they wake up till they fall asleep, there are always screens in front of them, whether it's their mobile screen, a screen in a classroom, a desktop, or a projection screen. And so to actually have them delete an app or to begin to put the phone away from their body was another good one. You saw a lot more of their eyes. They were looking at each other. And even though they sit right next to each other every day, it was a different experience, I think, for them.
We'll wake up in the morning.
So to me, wow, something as fundamental as eye contact is actually something that we need to start teaching again. We need to start showing people that emotional cues are super important, and it is great that, I really do believe this, it is great that we have computers in our classrooms and iPads and that kids learn how to code, but these smaller things, let's not lose sight of them, that they're important too. I also think it's important to look at this on a macro level. IBM did a survey of 1,500 CEOs, and they identified creativity as the most important leadership competency that they are looking for. So how do we make sure that our future leaders have this competency if they don't even know what it's like to let their minds wander? If they don't know how to sit quietly and make unexpected connections and do this deep thinking, So I don't think that swearing off our devices is the solution, and obviously you guys don't either, but I really think a more purposeful relationship with it, turning it back into a tool, is a wonderful thing. So in the end, Bored and Brilliant, we had 20,000 participants, all 50 states, dozens of countries, 90% cut down on phone time, 70% got more time to think, WNYC got a book deal out of it. I was like, this is awesome, there's no way we can ever top this. Oh, but just you wait. Info Magical, that happened in January. This was another week of experiments because our audience was like, we want more, we want more, we want more. I was like, okay, I gotta come up with something. So this time it was less about your phone and more about all the stuff coming out of it. So it's the silliest name ever, but I think it's like, let's just call it something absolutely silly because we have to have fun with this stuff, right? Infomagical is about making information overload disappear, finding focus, and rediscovering the magic of clearer thinking. So before I tell you about the project, I just want to explain how we got here. For me, it was really listening to all the things that the people who did Bored and Brilliant were telling me. They were like, this is great, but I still have to go to school, I still have to work, I still have to have these gadgets, and I feel like I'm not making the most of them when I do even use them. So here's what they told me. I know the acoustics are tough in here, so if you want to, I see one woman closing her eyes to listen. I love that. So if you want to do that, please do.
When we wake up in the morning, there's this endless loop of personal emails, text messages, voicemails, work emails, work meetings.
My question is about focus and how technology is affecting it.
Direct messages, status updates, friend requests from Twitter, Facebook.
Do we get stuck in the loop of just browsing at things that make us feel good or look nice? And then we become so overwhelmed with all of the ideas that we just don't do it. What does that do?
LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. Each medium forces us to review, make a decision, keep, delete, reply, and move to the next request. When you finally reach that one day when you feel like you've conquered managing all of your cues, the feeling is short-lived when you fall behind tomorrow. Any help or suggestions or best practices?
We see that.
Any help or suggestions? I was like, no, dude, I got it too. I have no idea. So I started doing my research, and what we did was we did a survey of 2,000 of our listeners, sort of to see what information overload really meant to people. What were some of the things that were coming up from that for them? And as you can see, it's a really interesting mix of good and bad. There's this ambivalence between the wonders that we have in the digital age and the anxiety, love that word, anxiety, that seems to be served up with it all the time. 75% of our listeners said that they often continue consuming information despite feeling as though they have reached information overload. You know that feeling? Like it's the end of the day, you're tired, you're really tired, and you're like, oh, I'll just look at Facebook, I'll just check email, we just keep going, we keep scrolling, we keep tapping. And so the question was like, why? Why do we keep going? Is it forcing us to do that or what? So some people told me, I don't want to miss something that I think will inspire me. I feel a need to always stay up to date so I'm not embarrassed if it comes up in conversation. I am somehow deeply convinced, this one really resonates with me, I am somehow deeply convinced that I should be able to accomplish more in a day than I would ever expect of another person. Yeah, I want to be inspired, I want to come across as intelligent, I want to be as incredibly productive as I possibly can. But when I describe this feeling of wanting to consume more articles, more posts, more Pinterest pages, despite this sense that my brain was full, I spoke to the psychologist Dimitrios Tsvirikos, and this was the diagnosis that he gave me. Yeah, a contemporary...
You see that they
Go for it. No worries. Go ahead.
Very often among people who live in urban areas, in bigger cities, that they're starving for information. They're craving information because they feel that that level of information will actually make them better informed. They're keeping up, with friends and family. We're keeping up because they want to be educated. In reality, what a digital junkie is actually doing is overindulging information, and information that's not actually being stored or said in a meaningful way that can actually mean something and control of general knowledge.
So I don't know if you heard that last part. What he said was, you, with that Greek accent especially, he called me a contemporary modern digital junkie. He says he sees this often. They're often in urban areas. I was like, I feel like I'm like a species. And what a digital junkie is actually doing is overindulging in information that is not actually stored in any meaningful way that can actually contribute to your general knowledge. In other words, more information doesn't necessarily make you more informed. Shocking. And there are good reasons that we feel this disconnect between what we want and what we are capable of actually consuming. I hope you can hear this one. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin told me, and he used email as an example.
There's a certain number of decisions you can make before you deplete the brain's capacity for making good decisions. So do I read this one now or later? Do I reply to it? Do I forward it to someone else? Do I mark it as spam? Do I need to gather more information before I can reply? That's 5 decisions right there, and that's one email, and you haven't even dealt with it yet.
So he's saying, like, you don't get, like, computers, they're infinite, right? But your brain, you've got only so much, and it uses up glucose, and there's a finite amount every single day. So that minute you, like, fire up email, it's 9 o'clock, you open it up, wait, it's mom. Wait, should I tell her that now? I don't really, maybe I'll tell her that. I could put it in the archive section, or maybe I would file it there. I should forward it to my sister, because actually she has the answer. Like, that's already 5 decisions. My glucose? No wonder you're tired by the end of the day, right? We feel maxed out, and yet society says to us, keep going, stay up to date. You can do it, don't miss out. FOMO, fear of missing out. And I spoke to an anthropologist from Intel. I'm gonna scoot ahead. Yes, Intel has an anthropologist. She's the coolest, Genevieve Bell, and she told me that really what she's seeing as she looks globally is that families, communities, entire cultures are trying to figure out what are the societal norms when it comes to people's relationship to technology. And she really thinks that we are at an important crossroads, and she really compares it to like when people fall in love and you can't think of anything else.
We're having that moment with the technology, right? Like we have fallen in love with it and it is all consuming. But there will be a moment when we need to put out the trash, go do the laundry, go talk to someone else. And I think where that moment fits and what the choices are we make at that moment will be really telling. There's also a piece that says, how do you start to decide what the most useful things are that this technology does?
So I don't know if you heard that last line. How do we decide what the most useful thing is that this technology does? And we decided we needed to start asking that question now. So more specifically, what is the most useful information that my technology can deliver to me? And the theory that we wanted to test out with InfoMagical was, if people purposefully choose to focus on the right information, could they end their FOMO and their information overload? And so to start, we asked them to choose an information goal. Ever wanted to be more creative, more knowledgeable, more up to date on the news, more in touch with your family and friends, more in tune with yourself? I'm assuming more in tune with yourself is like the thesis of this afternoon, so let's pretend that that's the one. And the idea is like, you know, you haven't talked to Aunt Margaret in a long time. You guys used to be really close, so prioritize that. Or you haven't been having this conversation with yourself very often, so you need to prioritize it. It's not just going to happen magically. And actually, psychologists that we spoke to approved this concept of choosing an information goal because the neuroscientific word is schema. Staying with a schema has been proven to improve memory, cognition. It makes the information count. So then during InfoMagical Week, again, 5 mornings straight, we released a podcast with the assignment for the day. We also checked in with people regularly via text. Ironic, I know. But I really feel that we have to meet people where they are. And we were creating this trusted relationship. We were trying to keep them on track. There's actually another word for that. They call it probes in the lab. So we sort of were acting as probes. And we also wanted to measure the effects. Like, is what we were doing even working? We sent 300,000 texts. I got 1,700 voicemails from people. I listened to every single one. Talk about information overload. So the first one, I don't know if you saw this article in the New York Times style section a couple weeks ago. It was about one of the first day, what we asked people to do, which was we asked people to single task. Do just one single thing at one time and do it until it's done. Just read a Facebook post. Just have a conversation with your child. It sounds so silly and stupid, but like I see you nodding. It's harder than it sounds, right? And one of the reasons was there is this very interesting recent research into our shifting attention. This wonderful professor, Gloria Mark at UC Irvine, found that a decade ago, we used to switch our attention between offline, online stuff about once every 3 minutes. Now we do it every 45 seconds. I mean, that's how much faster we are getting. It is not your imagination. And the more people switch, the more stress they feel. So day one's assignment actually ended up being the most popular and effective. I don't know if I want to play you this montage. Can you guys hear the audio, or is it just not very well? I know. I think our listeners just are like, yeah, high on life. I don't know. I think it's the acoustics in here. In any case, this montage that we had one woman saying that she went and sat in her car at Whole Foods and was like, went to post something on Instagram about the coffee she got, but then she just put it down and cried. And she said it was the best thing that ever happened to her. I was like, yes, you got more in touch with yourself, awesome. Yeah, the montage is good. Well, I'm not gonna skip it. So we had over 30,000 participants this time. 71% felt less overloaded. 79% that they felt that they can now better manage information overload. And I think on an individual level, the goal is to feel saner, right? To have a more productive life doing the things that truly matter to you, not to somebody else. And on a macro level, by one estimate, knowledge workers in the US waste 25% of their time just dealing with data streams. And it costs, this is a crazy number, it costs the economy $997 billion annual. Just like we're the computers now, sifting through all this information coming at us. And so it's almost like we have to be our own best filters, right? Until the technology companies figure it out. It's the way it has to go. So today we launched a boot camp version of Infomagical. Coincidence? I don't think so. Beshert, as my husband would say. Meant to be. Today's boot camp version that just came out on Note to Self, we really doubled down on the single tasking. That seems to be really what people most wanted to do. So there is the science there if you'd like to listen to it. Some other great scholars who contributed to us. And I hope you'll do it with us, and I hope you'll discover podcasting. And thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to take questions or facilitate a conversation if you guys want to talk to each other about any of these things. Whatever you want to do, this is your time. Thank you.
So many of us are church professionals in here, and there is always lots of conversations about utilizing social media and digital stuff while in worship, which would be multitasking, and maybe some folks say not being fully present while in worship. I guess just some thoughts and feedback on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, is it terrible to say the word balance again? Like, I really think, to me, what I'm seeing is that there's a whole generation of kids who don't know how to talk to themselves, how to check in with themselves and say, is now a good time for me to be tweeting about this? Because maybe it is a good time. Or, wow, I really need to sit and be quiet for a little bit. And I think this reflexiveness, going always broadcasting what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what's everybody else doing, means that a lot of these kids who I heard from don't even know what it's like to be alone. They don't understand solitude. Like, they really don't, and they can't miss it because they don't know what it is. So to me, I need to be better at that. I need to check in with myself. How does this feel? Not good. Okay, then don't do it, you know, duh. Or, no, it's fine, I want to tell people. Then that's fine, that's great. But just check in, you know, make sure it's being used. You're in control, not everybody else. I went on Monday night, I was at the Electronic Privacy Information Center's forum. They had a big gala. These are the people in Washington writing the legislation, the lawyers for privacy and data and surveillance in our country. And I was trying to explain to them, and I think they kind of weren't, they didn't quite see the connection between this entire generation who doesn't know what solitude is or appreciate solitude and why this needs to be a huge issue in the presidential election. But to me, if you don't value solitude, then you don't value privacy. No wonder no one cares about the fact that all of these apps have all of our data. I got nothing to hide. Well, that means you've got no interior life going on, right? So to me, there's a line, and that's what I'm really trying to do, is make that connection for people. And I think, you know, I love this idea of people who love technology, but also understand it's powerful stuff. It is powerful. That's why it's so interesting, right? Like, it's so many shades of gray. Oh, great.
In the Jewish tradition, the rabbis say that the angel wings on the top of the ark come across and form the back of like a seat. And there are rabbinic teachers who say that those wings mark out an empty space that is the space of all possibility. And so when you have the Ark of the Covenant that holds the Torah scroll is, for that time, the new piece of technology. So you have the new piece of technology and with it, the empty space of all possibility. And then when John's resurrection story says there's an angel sitting at the head and the foot of the bed where Jesus lays, the image he's recreating is the image of the empty space of all possibility, the image of the space on top of the Ark of the Covenant. So that in our tradition, there is an empty space, and we don't talk about it enough. And to talk about it, and this is a place where technology and religion could connect up, talking about the need for the empty space to work with the technology so that there's that space of possibility from which flows new ideas with which to use the technology.
I think naming something is incredibly powerful, and there's an opportunity here. You know, I always think of it as like the Eskimos have like 50 different words for snow. I feel like we need to come up with different words for like all these emotions that we've never felt before because we've never had the technology before, you know? Overwhelmed can only get you so far, I feel like, so I leave it to the linguistic scholars here to come up with some good ones. Yeah, hi.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. I'm so excited you're here. So I love this, just talking about mindlessness and making space to just kind of space out, because I have kids at home as well, and try to, you know, cobble together a whole bunch of side projects in my life and call that work. And so
I hear you, sister.
But I'm really trying to figure out how to connect just this sense of creating space for silence as a way to create more community. I'm wondering if you have any practices that you all do, like your workplace or just whatever your workplace looks like. Is there anything that you all do intentionally to create some of this space for mindlessness and whatnot?
Oh, wow, that brings up so many things. I did this talk, a version of this talk for a group of librarians and school technologists. And we sort of were bantering and like, what could we do? And I think a lot of it comes down to permission, right? We've been told that being bored, only boring people get bored, right? But what if we reframed it and said, boredom is gonna actually make you more creative. It's gonna make you more productive. It's gonna make you better at your work. I think we need to rethink of what it is, and I had a lot of these people come to me and said, because you told me to do it, bless them, they did it, and they did it they kind of put their trust in me, they gave it a try, and I always feel like you can never describe the results, right? You just have to try it. So one of the librarians was like, we were like, what if you had a default mode area in your school or in your home? And I was thinking about it, I was like, the bathtub is my kid's default mode area. It is the one place where they kind of sit, and my daughter has 4 washcloths, and God knows what she's doing with them all, but like she's building things and making sandwiches and talking to imaginary friends, and it is beautiful, and I really try to stay out of her way while she's doing that. So I think carving out time, naming it, again, comes back to that, reframing it. Now you asked about my own workplace. Oh my God, we are just at capacity, and so this isn't really about building community, but making me a better coworker. I have joined a silent workspace that I try to go to at least 1 or 2 days a week. And you know, that took some hard, as much as I love being with my team, we have a great time, the most important work I do is my writing. And I know myself that I need a 4-hour stretch in order to really get to the deeper stuff, to the better stuff, because otherwise I'm just putting out crap. So I need to go there to do my most important work. And when I have my most important work, then I feel proud to bring it to my team, and I know that my producer can turn it into great radio, and I know that my digital assistant can think about really interesting ways to reach more people and talk about it. But if I don't have that core stuff, then there's nothing else there, you know? I just really feel, for me, it's like a shallow life. We only get one go around, at least in my thinking, so I gotta go down, right? Anybody else want to add to this?
Yeah. Did Bored and Brilliant change you as a parent, and in what way might it affect your parenting style?
You know, I think, and I don't know if some of you agree with this, but like in Brooklyn, where I live, it's like, oh my God, my kid needs to be doing something all the time. I'm a bad parent if they're not constantly being stimulated. Look at this new Lego set, and you're learning to code, and wow, guitar lessons. Like, it is just, you know, maximizing. And I've become the parent that's like, you're bored? Good. Figure it out. And honestly, to me, like, I just have this, I remember very vividly being 8 years old and gathering all the house plants and naming them all and like putting them there and then singing songs to them. So look where I'm standing right now. There's obviously something that, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's really important, like formative times, let's not impress everything on them. Let them go and figure it out a little bit. But I mean, it is hard. My kids are super whiny and like really, you know, and you're trying to make dinner and you are also trying to do your own work, and is this constant push and pull that, like, I feel like my mom just ignored us a lot. And yes, it is a good skill. It's being able to entertain yourself. I am working hard on it. I'm no longer, I notice that I no longer get bored ever, now that I love boredom. Does that make any sense? And I want my kids to get there too.
So I actually live on Long Island and did the Infomagical thing when it aired during Morning Edition on WNYC. And so this morning, as I was streaming and listening to the news from back home and the boot camp session came on, I had a moment where I realized how much I had backslidden since January when Infomagical first aired. I was curious, have you developed any techniques or means that have helped keep you to a task in the same way that, you know, during Bored and Brilliant, deleting 2 dots was?
It is hard. I'm not gonna lie. But so I have a Post-it note on my desk that says, think about what you read. I know. Duh, right? Like, yeah, because I'm compulsive, right? Like, I want to read everything. And I read a lot, but when I finally learned that everything I was reading wasn't actually helping me, oh, what a relief. Then I guess I don't have to read it all, you know? That did sort of like lighten the load psychically for me. I still struggle because I still seem to think as that lovely woman did, that I am capable of more than anybody else is, but I'm not. So chill, you know. Like to me, it's important. Like when you understand the science that goes with it, the part that is the niggle in your back of your mind that's like, come on, you can do it. No, your brain is just like everybody else's. It is no different or better, and that makes me feel better, oddly. But I think what you're hitting on is the cycle that we are in, right? Like when you go back, it's all going to be relevant, what you've just talked about. But a year from now, I mean, who knows? 5 years from now, what we're talking about in terms of AI coming about, Internet of Things, all of our connected appliances, this stuff is changing. And so we have to remain vigilant, I think, for ourselves and for how we think about these things. This is not a static situation, which is, again, why it makes it really exciting. Oh, sorry.
Hi. So I haven't done boot camp or Infomagical. Probably need to because I'm as addicted as anyone else. I'm sure I'm on the 150 views a day end of things. But I also have a lot of formation in a deeply contemplative practice. I learned a lot from Jesuits, and a couple years ago I did a 30-day silent retreat.
Wow.
So there's a lot of drama amongst non-Jesuits who did Jesuit practices about this 30-day retreat. And a number of these retreat directors will insist that you go completely silent digitally. And so I was all prepared to do that. And I was in this deep, like, grit my teeth and I can do it zone. And my spiritual director the first day said to me, I expect you to check in with at least your husband, but the other people who are important to you through whatever medium you need to at least once a day. And it was the weirdest thing. It was like I was all ready to grit my teeth and do it. In some ways, in the same way I want to power through anything and everything else. And it was so graceful to say, okay, I can actually own how much of this I want to consume. I was ready to go cold turkey, but now that I don't have to, I am neither gritting my teeth to consume as much as possible, nor to consume as little as possible, but to consume what's right in the context of the retreat. And it was kind of an amazing experience to re-embrace those tools from this powerful sense of choice and agency. So it's just interesting. You know, now I'm back to my familiar habits, but I actually know from that experience of, you know, checking in for 5 minutes once a day over a whole month that I can do it. So that feels really great.
That is awesome.
So that's one thought. But
Can I just stop you there for one second? You know what it reminds me of is I visited a summer camp. You know, mostly
very much like that.
When kids go to summer camp, you know, you turn in your thing, it's back to nature. But this summer camp in particular said no.
Right.
We want them to bring their phones because if they can't learn how to deal with them here in a safe environment with love and respect and nurturing and friendship, where are they going to learn? And I thought that was really great.
Very much like that. No, it was very much like that. It came as a gift, and it was so empowering to say, actually, I can use this the way I want to. Not by reducing, but actually by adding in the little bit that that feels right. But anyway, sort of related to that, you've talked at a couple of points, Manoush, about productivity and loss of $9 billion of whatever. And I was thinking there's a part of me that always is a little uncomfortable with that way of framing the way we use our technology, or really anything else that we kind of do without agency or without a sense of control over it, which is, I'm not sure I want to be $9 billion more productive, or that I want anybody else to be. And I think what we're missing, speaking from my tradition, is a sense of Sabbath. And where this comes up for me is reflecting in this whole session about how church people in particular use technology and how we appropriate and integrate culture change in general. It's this kind of like, I don't like this, and then like, oh, it's all around me, now I got to deal with it. I think a lot of times what we're missing is people and families are actually doing the absolute best they can given the cultural cues and the kind of water we swim in. And I tend to think, and this is self-referential, but my own behavior, I can't sit in front of a screen and be productive 8 hours a day. Probably the smart thing would be for me to go out and go for a walk for 10 minutes once an hour. But since that will be a little bit weird in my workplace, what I do for 10 minutes an hour is I flip over to Facebook, to Amazon to do some shopping, and so I'm doing that flipping in some ways as a defensive mechanism because I don't want to be productive all the time, and I can't be productive all the time.
But I think what we're saying is actually you going for a walk is productive,
No,
right?
I know that. I hear you saying that, but I almost don't want to commodify that.
Oh, I see.
I want to say, I don't care if you're $9 billion less productive because you will be that much more human. You will reclaim a practice of Sabbath. So that's, I don't know.
I totally hear you, and I'm going to tell you a secret. You are not my typical audience. Yeah, exactly. And this has been really great for me because I think you're coming to it just as you described. What's your name, Julia? That you are coming to it like you're like, I don't care about being productive. Most of the people I give this talk to are entrepreneurs, or they are in the tech field, or they're students or teachers or people who want to optimize themselves, right? This tricks them into thinking because really, once you do it, I do think once you think, oh, this is why I'm doing it, I have permission, I'll be more productive, that's what my goal is, and then you get there and you're like, whoa, I just reconnected with myself. That is so powerful, whether it's for religious reasons or yoga or whatever. However I have to get people there, I'm going to get them there. And because if we don't do this, I truly am worried. That's where it is. I truly am worried. This idea of solitude has become sort of my call. It's about self-regulation. It's about self-care. It's about self-love. It's about giving yourself space. And like, you guys know that, but most of the people don't. So. But you know, right there. Hey.
I am in month 2 of a 4-month sabbatical. And one of the things that my vestry and leaders worried with me about was getting off total social media stuff. Now,
So you're off right now?
No. But I have minimized it. But the interesting thing was a couple of weeks before I actually left, I began an intentional practice of going through emails and taking myself off lists. I.e., I'm thinking, why am I on Eddie Bauer's list? You know, I don't need to be here. I haven't bought anything in years. Land's End, LL Bean. And some of it was other stuff. I had no idea how many I got until I began to unsubscribe. And it was this amazingly freeing. It was like, beep, delete, done. If I want to buy something, I'll go to your website, right? And just that for 2 weeks was a revelatory piece to me. It's like, good God, no wonder I feel overwhelmed. And that's on top of personal stuff.
Yeah.
And Facebook and Instagram and a weekly email to the parish, you know, the whole 9 yards. So I was just illuminating to me. So thank you.
And of course, you know, the people who make those things are watching your behavior very, very carefully. So now, for real, anytime you do subscribe to something, it's like whack-a-mole, right? They sell your data to other third-party places, and then you suddenly are on this other list, and you're like, wait, I have never shopped at Talbot's before in my life. How did they get this email? I mean, that is, not to paint them as sinister, but that is what they are doing, because that's the way the system so far has been set up. Unfortunately. But awesome. There's also something called, I tried it for a little while, Unroll.me. It's worked for a while and then it stopped working, but it unsubscribes you automatically or it puts them all in one thing and you can just get them to do it for you, which is kind of cool. Anybody else? Hey, Elizabeth.
I would like you to talk a little bit more, if you would, about, I don't let my children have too much screen time. And so they think it's their role to push back and demand more screen time. And I would like to start with my 8-year-old giving him the power to turn off screens himself.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone is all primed to be a technological addict, it's my 8-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas about how to help young people learn to sort of wean themselves off without my having to sort of be the force that gets them off? As he gets older, I'd like to be able to train him a little bit more.
I mean, these brains are very, I am not a pediatric neuroscientist, but I have spoken to some. And I mean, it's a muscle, right? It's almost like you are his personal trainer and he needs to come see you every day and you show him what exercises to do. And eventually, he's gonna have the muscle that when the show ends, he turns it off instead of waiting until the credits roll and then another show starts and he just sits there. But I've observed it in my own children. I mean, we know that blue light affects our sleep. We know that it stimulates us in ways that lets us not mellow out. I mean, you probably see this too. Like, my kids are in the worst mood after a screen is turned off, right? For like half an hour, they're just total jerks. And I can't help but think there's like a detox or something that has to happen. Like, it's almost like the blue light, I don't know, metaphorically has to like get out of their system or something like that. So I try to give them their space after like screen time is done. I try to say it's 15 minutes. Okay, maybe he gets grace period a couple times after that, and then it's okay. He needs a little like alone time, a little Lego action, that's cool, and then I engage him. Because I've noticed if I try to talk to him or do something with him immediately after screen time, I mean, it's just parental abuse that I get. So for me, I think that's, the other thing is like that I've been observing, like it's hard work being a policewoman all the time, right? It's exhausting. But this is the hard work that this generation of parents has been tasked with, is being on these kids, maybe even explaining to them why, showing them beautiful alternatives. If they are having screen time, I mean, I can't do this, but I really admired this Google programmer. I went and just watched his family to see, like, how does somebody who works at Google use computers with his family, his little kids? And he was like doing a programming thing with him, which was great because he was so excited about it and they were building something together and it was awesome. I can't do that. I don't make things on there. And so, but I do tell stories. So I prefer to put on a great movie for my kid than to give him a crappy game. Because that's my thing, right? I love stories. So I can connect, we can talk about what happened. That's a protagonist. You know, it's something that I can engage with him, whereas a game, I just don't see any redeeming value, unless it's, on the other hand, it's a treat. You know, it's this constant push and pull, and I think it comes down to what is your kid like, too, that you really have to know. Is your kid somebody who needs to not have 2 dots on your phone? Or could it be like a Saturday thing while he's waiting for his sister who has ballet? You know what I mean? Like, I think it really comes down to the temperament of your kids. That's what I've observed. But the pediatricians say, no, they're not going to self-regulate. This stuff is way more powerful than their developing brains. It's your job. Well, exactly, right? I know. And if we can barely handle it, I mean, just look at the number of texting deaths there are in automobile accidents. You know, the stakes just get higher and higher and higher. So I think it's about values too, right? Anybody else?
I think I'm over here.
Oh, great. Hey.
You talked a little bit about how the designers of these things are, you know, deeply, in many cases, you know, sort of tied in, deeply invested in keeping us on them, you know, and that's come up on the show a lot. You know, infinite scroll is, you know, an example. There's not a point where you get to the end and then it says, go have a good day. I love that in the Gmail app. When you get to the end of your email, the Gmail app says, like, enjoy your day or something.
I know, right? They're like, because we got you everywhere else that you're going.
Yeah. But you talked about this string of, you know, so you unsubscribe and they sell your data to someone else. And have you encountered a sort of counterculture to that within this tech and media world? You know, people thinking about, like, is there a totally different model? Obviously, we made some decisions along the way that feels like it locked us into a model for how this is going to work going forward. Are you aware of counter movements among that?
I'm not seeing a lot, I'll be honest. I have looked for it, and when I first started looking for it, I was like, I'm going to discover the most amazing community. There's not a ton of them because, sadly, how do the people who make this technology pay the bills, put food on the table? That's the way that the ad, it's ad based. I mean, to me, it's been like, yeah, me and my husband are going to pay for the New York Times. I believe in it. I look at it. I'm going to pay for it. That's not going to work for a lot of places. So on the one hand, I think for a lot of these companies, they're going to go out of business, and maybe that's okay, I have run into a couple people who, it's interesting, there's a guy named Tristan Harris. He was a tech entrepreneur who sold his company to Google for a lot of money, and then had like an awakening, and then decided to create his own job at Google as ethicist. Google sort of wasn't entirely happy about that. He has since left the company and is doing sort of his own writing and thinking. When you've sold your tech company, I guess you have enough money to have the space to do some of that. I mean, he's 25 years old, I think, and but people like that, I think there's going to start to be more and more of people like that. Another person that I just interviewed was Ashkan Soltani, he's a really interesting guy. He was one of the journalists who went through all the Snowden documents for the Washington Post, and prior to that, he did a series for the Wall Street Journal explaining how data and privacy work. Very interesting, he went to the FTC to try and start regulation and legislation to force these companies, at least at the minimum, transparency. When you download this app, at the minimum, you should know what they're doing. Guess what? It's in that 50-page thing that you say yes to that you don't read. But at least it's there. So we're starting with, again, baby steps. And then he went to the White House, and after 2 months, he had his clearance denied. So he is now building out a camper van and going rock climbing for 6 months. But I think he'll be back. So there's starting to be, there has to be this intersection, I think, between the government and the people making the technology and the legislators and the people doing what you all do. We're in an interdisciplinary time, right? In a way that I don't think we have ever seen before. I mean, just the fact that this event is happening, I think really speaks to that, right? So it's exciting, and I think once people, if you live in San Francisco, you're in your own little silo, but it's up to us and the rest of the country to sort of talk about these things, and it doesn't have to be good or bad, right? It's just, let's talk about it.
And we've got time for 2 more, I think.
Okay.
Hi. Sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, I quit smoking.
Congratulations.
And thank you. But in the late 90s, in the late 2000s, I picked it up again briefly. It was like I was out with people, having a couple of beers, somebody was smoking. Oh, can I buy one of those? Thinking it would be one. And so for about a month, picked up smoking again, and I could feel that old addiction was coming back. Okay, fast forward. A year ago, January, I quit games. I deleted all of them. You're better at 2 dots than I was. I can see from the little thing.
Oh, that was nothing.
Oh.
Go on.
No, you would. So,
and why?
2 dots was one. Candy Crush, you name it, I was there. I watched a guy on the train yesterday playing a game I used to play. It was 2048. It's a math game.
You wanted it. I like breathe down people's necks on the subway when they're playing 2 dots. I'm like, it's pathetic. But it sounds like you know yourself. Like, you now know that, like, you can't have just one, so.
And so this past January, after a year of being sober, I played again a little bit. Just one. I'm just going to have one. It's vacation. I'm on break. I'm going to play a game.
How was it?
Awesome. But I could feel it. And at the end of the night, I was like, no, just delete the game. But then, sort of every day for a couple of weeks, I was downloading another one and playing it. And so here is the month of smoking again, because the games are hooking me. And you know, between every 2 rounds, you're getting an ad now.
Right.
Which wasn't happening 10 years ago with the games.
Okay, I have a question for you. The times that you quit, did you stop and take a moment and say, oh, this feels great?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so you did mark that moment.
Oh, yes.
Okay, because I think some people only think about the bad feeling, but they forget to be like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to feel good, you know?
So finally, you know, before the end of January, I was like, no, you have to go cold turkey again. And I have, pretty much. I mean, the one thing I'm allowed is the New York Times crossword.
Okay.
And I can download packs and blah, blah, blah.
That's good.
But so here, I now know that I have an addictive personality around these games. The people who make them
they love you.
Also know that.
Yes, they do.
And they play on that.
Oh, yes, they do.
And they sell advertising space on those games, and that's how they make a lot of money. So there's sort of 2 questions here. One, the neuroscientists that you've talked to, do they have thoughts about this addiction piece? And 2, I mean, so we're in a world where we would love to get an alternative message out that powerfully, that deeply, that attachedly. Maybe not quite attached is the wrong word for us.
No, I know what you're saying, yeah.
But that habitually. And we don't have the angels, the VCs, the whoever's that will necessarily support us in that. So do you know of any movements where there's capital behind the sort of the alternative to the games?
Okay, so the cognitive piece, I will use 2 dots as an example. You know how the balls bounce? Your brain really likes that. Yeah. You know how when you connect a square and the foam buzzes? Your brain really likes that too. You know how that cracks like that? The ice? I don't know if you got that far, but like your brain really, right, okay. Your brain really likes that. All of these places have cognitive designers, you know, that's as much as part of it. They call it user experience, UX. When you go online shopping, you know, they know, so I went into a guinea pig lab so they could watch me while I was online shopping. And it was really interesting what they asked me. They're like, when you put that in your cart, what were you feeling? I was like, I don't know. Actually, I really like that way that like thing goes there. And like they made me talk out loud every single feeling I had so that they can see like when I was like, I wasn't feeling anything. They're like, okay, so that click won't happen. We'll move that there. So this idea of design being just as important as the content itself. In terms of a backer, I don't know, but I will use my projects as an example. It's public radio. We don't have a ton of money. But to me, if you can combine the educational component, the digital literacy component, which sounds like, you know, a protein shake, yum, with the fun silliness. So when we were texting people, we would send them ridiculous GIFs, like really, really funny GIFs. Infomagical, this is like the silliest name, whatever. But I think right now we have to combine those 2 things, right? Like if you can bring the entertainment with the educational and this idea, like people love self-experimentation is what I'm learning, then you get people. And if they're all, and people were like, well, you know, it's an on-demand society. Why do you have to do it during like 1 week? There's something so powerful about knowing that you are doing this and 29,999 other people are doing it at the exact same time you are. That is cool. And you're all in this together, and there's a feedback loop, right? And I feel like with what you do, it's like my listeners. It's the same thing, right? So getting them to try things, to bring it back, feeling invested in it. I think there's a real opportunity there. A fun one, too. Yeah.
So we have a question from the webinar from
cool.
that camera right there.
Where?
And,
hello.
Well, you're looking above you. Your camera's right here. Well, you know, Manoush, your camera's above you right there. I'm looking at that camera. So, yeah, we're all around. So we have a lot of smart people on the webinar, and one asked, is there any research suggesting children and younger adults are learning compensations as they are growing with these technologies?
I'm sorry, say that. Are
learning compensations as they are growing with these technologies? Are they learning as they grow?
Oh, compensatory ways. Sure. I mean, one of the things, for example, is, kids don't know phone numbers, right? Because they don't have to. I can still tell you my best friend's phone number from across the street, 737-3563. No kid knows anybody else's phone number, which at first I was like, well, that's terrible. What would happen if they got lost somewhere? But on the other hand, they are able to use their technology as literally their brain's external hard drive, I would say, which then, if you think about it, frees you up to do some incredible other work if you don't then fill that space in your brain with all sorts of other stuff. So I think if you think of the phone as a way of extending your brain power, that's like really a wonderful thing. If you fill it up with other stuff, it's not such a wonderful thing. I mean, we do see, like, I downloaded Snapchat and I tried to figure it out. Do you guys, I couldn't, I think I'm too old. I could not figure it out. I can't tell you how many moms on the playground are like, they're like, I'm gonna Snapchat you. I was like, what, why are you doing it? They're like, I just have to figure it out. I just have to figure it out. I'm like, okay, I gave up. So their brains obviously are working in different ways, because if you see any 13-year-old, they're like, boop, you just go like that. Boop, what's wrong with you? So like they, okay. I mean, that I think is very interesting too. There is a generational relationship that we have not seen before. It used to be the older you got, the wiser you got. And now these kids, and I see it in my own staff, some of the younger staff, they know things that I do not know and I cannot teach them. So I have to be more open to learning from them. But what's important is that they also understand that I have things to show them too. That my 20 years of reporting means that I know how to source something. I know how to write better than you, and I can help you with that. Please understand that these are complementary skill sets. There's a different relationship, I think, between parents and their kids. I also talk to my children way differently than my parents ever did. I see my husband struggle with this. He'd be like, but I'm the father. I was right, thank you. Exactly. I was like, I was like, did your dad ever sit down and like build a Lego castle on the floor with you? He was like, no. I was like, right. You guys are friends, you're buddies. It's a different, and with that lovely relationship comes all sorts of other problems, I think. So we can't look to what has happened previously for this one. We are forging new ground is what I think we're doing. I don't know if that answered the question. I'm not entirely sure.
I think we need to close it there. Will you stick around for a couple minutes?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great.
This was so fun. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.